Welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live streaming interview series, where leading new thought teachers, speakers, and authors share the intimate stories behind the 10 best spiritual books that inspired them the most on their spiritual journey. From well-known classics to hidden gems you might never have heard of, the No BS Spiritual Book Club saves you time and money by sharing reliable recommendations from those who've walked the path before you. The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandy Sedgbeer.
Hello, welcome. Joining me today to share the 10 books that had the biggest impact on her life journey is snowboarding and laughter-loving shamanic practitioner, licensed professional counselor, hypnotherapist, Reiki master, and award-winning author Joan Engels-Smith. A leading expert in her field and the author of the books Through the Rabbit Hole, Exploring Energy and the Shamanic Journey, and Becoming Yourself, The Journey from Head to Heart, Joan Engels-Smith is founder of the Light Song School of 21st Century Shamanism and Energy Medicine, and she's developed the first energy medicine curricula of its kind for beginners, right through to those studying for bachelor's, master's, or their doctorate in shamanism. Joan Engels-Smith, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for your contribution to the 10 Best Spiritual Books Library. So tell us a little bit about your relationship with books and what you felt this process was like.
The process in the beginning, I thought it was going to be arduous and difficult. I wasn't sure that I wanted to take it on, but I found it to be quite enjoyable. And I think I wrote in my little note to you that I felt like I built an altar around me of books that I was sitting in the center of, just sort of feeling their energies talking to me. I will say that books are a big part of my life, not just because of me, but my husband, who has passed away, had a double doctorate, one in literature and one in poetry. And so we have books, we have walls of bookshelves almost in, places throughout the house. We have lots and lots of books that he was a scholar, a real scholar. And he taught me how to look at books differently. And I taught him how to look at books differently too through my shamanic work. And so I am surrounded with their energies. But in my own process, it felt as if I was taking a trip back through my life and the beauty of these inspirational guides and how much influence they actually had. I was just astounded at the effect of some of them, some professional and others very personal, just a personal connection for some reason, how the book was presented, who gave it to me. All these things made a difference in the energy that they held for me. So it was a beautiful.
It's, I've heard this from every single person, and we're probably almost at 300 people now who've contributed. They all think it's going to be arduous, and they all say, oh my God, it was like doing a life review without leaving my body. And it's true. I mean, we look back on a book and we think it's been there, done that. But actually, when we take ourselves back in time to when we first read that book, we realize how far we've come. I think it's a way of looking at your journey and remembering the process of getting to where you are today.
Yeah. And I mention this in my classes quite often to students. I'll say, have you ever picked up a book and read it or started to read it and say, this isn't for me? And then 10 years later, you pick up the same book and you think, oh my God, this is like the Bible. What happened? The words are still the same, but you changed. You got to the place where you could really understand and ingest the book. And it's a testimony for how we change and grow through time.
Absolutely, yeah. So your first book Creative visualization. Use the power of your imagination to create what you want in your life, by Shakti Gawain, published in 1978. And you said that you read this in your early 20s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right after it came out. So yes, that book was amazing for me. I have had a different view of the world, of nature, of life ever since I was a little itty bitty. But I never had the vocabulary or the culture or the family that could support how I worked and what I felt in life. And Shakti Gawain, with the whole thing of vision boarding and visualizing and kind of relating to an object as if it had, I'm going to say, an intelligence, because in shamanism we say that everything has an intelligence. It opened up that world of, oh, I know how to do this. I can relate to this. Then I became a teacher of this. Interestingly, I just found an old goal board of mine underneath my sofa. I had tucked away, I kind of stick them on and pull them out. And I looked at that thing, and every single thing on there had manifested. But anyway, I became a student of it, taught it, loved it, and it opened doors of how manifesting works. So I loved it.
So number 2, How to Survive the Loss of a Love, a different kind of guide to overcoming all your emotional hurts, by Melba Colgrove and Harold Bloomfield, published in 1981.
Yeah, this book changed my life. It started getting me up at 4:00 in the morning and starting my prayers and meditation, and which I've been a student of now for all these years. But yeah, it looked at surviving loss in a way that I had never thought of before. And when I'm saying loss, it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody has to die, but the loss of a job, the loss of a relationship, the loss of a friendship, the loss of a home, whatever. And how you can change your viewpoint on blessing situations, blessing people that have hurt you, instead of making them your enemy. And the more you bless them, the more you, now I understand, change your internal vibration and then start attracting different, better outcomes to yourself and to them. It makes it a win-win. So again, these are foundational in a lot of my philosophies in life. And this was one of the first books that opened me up to that. And and I can't say verbatim any line in that book, but that's what I'm left with, the feeling of it.
Book number 3, Wind Horse Woman, A Marriage of Spirit, by Lynn Andrews, published in 1989.
Yes, my husband gave me that book, and I had been in the midst of my shamanic training, but I wasn't a practitioner yet. And it took place in Nepal, which I ended up going to. I mean, it really affected me in a big way, but I was going on this trip, a 7 or 8 week packing trip in the Himalayas. And the book opened up all of these different worlds of, again, communicating to objects as if they could communicate back to you. But I had a very mystical experience over there. It changed my life, and it's written in my book as well as in another quite well-known book of spiritual awakenings, the stories that affect us, and it's published in there also. But it was with Mount Everest, and I had this incredible experience with Mount Everest, and I ended up being the only person. All of my team had left because of altitude sickness, and they had to go back down, and so I was by myself and had this experience with Everest and this red-billed chaw bird that was, there's no life in this place at all. I mean, there's just barren rock, and this bird was standing next to me for this very long time until finally I looked at it and I said, "What? What do you want?" And then it told me this incredible story about myself, and it changed my life. I mean, it was, and I got that from the book, that you can have these journeys and have these experiences with spirits and animals. And so in that book, it was the snow leopard.
That, I've read that story in your book, Becoming Yourself, and it's one of those stories where synchronicity after synchronicity after synchronicity happened. And one, okay, but two and then three, that's magic.
Yeah. Yeah. It truly was. And it's what I needed. I needed that special attention. And the spirits knew that, and they gave it to me full sail with the biggest mountain in the world. It was great.
Yeah. Book number 4, Future Memory, How Those Who See the Future Shed New Light on the Workings of the Human Mind by PMH Atwater, one of my favourite people, published in 1996. And I really like this book. I recommend it a lot, yeah.
Nice.
Now, you say your son gave you this book for Christmas when he was about 12 years old. That's a very mature thing, a very mature choice.
Yes. And I'm sure he was helped by his father, but but it was still a very special thing because my children were very young when I started my shamanic practice. And they had a lot to handle with that. I mean, their mom was very different from the other moms that they encountered with their friends. Him giving me that book had a special place in my heart, that it was like, you get me. You're not buying something for you to give to me. You're buying something that you think I would enjoy, which a lot of people don't give gifts that way, but he did, and then of course in shamanism, the future is just as easy to journey into and take a look, heal the future before it happens, do all kinds of things. And that book explains it somewhat. It's not completely a shamanic viewpoint of it. It's more of a mind type of thing, but it still was a very special and validated a lot of things that I was receiving.
I read that book in 1999, just after I'd landed in America for a new adventure. And it just kind of blew my mind that she could have these experiences, and so many of them. And then some years later, I interviewed her.
Oh, nice.
And I said to her, I still can't get my head totally around that book. There's something that goes on, and I have this kind of, I don't know what's going on in my head, but I don't have it with any other book. And she roared with laughter. I said, it's like a labyrinth. And she said, that's exactly how I was told to write the book by my guides. That I had to write it like a labyrinth. And she said that there are people who read that book every year, and every year they have a different experience.
That's what a labyrinth.
Yeah, amazing. Book number 5, Soul Retrieval, Mending the Fragmented Self by Sandra Ingerman, also published in 1991.
Yes, this book came to me in a very, if you want to use this word serendipitous, I like to use the word spirit dancing type of way. But I was handed this book by an angel channeler, and she said, "This is your life." And when I read it, I felt as if I had written it, even though I had no idea about the subject or shamanism when I read it. But it was so familiar to me. When things were explained, I was like, oh, I get that. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I had these feelings inside of me as a child that I could never really quite explain. But like my dad was a big hunter, and he had lots of pelts and lots of stuffed animals and stuff. And they were my playmates. I was talking to the animals, when I was just a little itty bitty. And so, when wrote this book, Soul Retrieval, it's like there was this understanding of shamanism that I carried inside of me with power animals and spirit teachers and all these things that I'd never had the vocabulary for. But after reading it, I contacted the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, excuse me, and started my training in shamanism. That was the beginning, because this woman handed me the book and said, "This is your life." It's like, okay, let's take a look at it.
And you've conducted over 3,500
Yes.
soul retrieval healing ceremonies. That's a heck of a lot.
Oh my God, is it ever? When you consider that each one is about 7 or 8 hours long,
Wow.
it is a tremendous amount. And they're all documented. Every single one of them are documented. I use it as research in the furthering education of the advancement of understanding of soul retrieval.
Is it innovating to do that for that length of time and to be somewhere else?
Well, sometimes after too much, I felt like my eyeballs were spinning in two different directions. Yes, I mean, I would say that I was spending more of my day in an altered state than a 3D state. But according to the spirits, that's where you want to live. I mean, because we get too boxed in to our rules and thinking and conditions, and we lose our magic because we're so boxed in. And so I would say I have a lot of magic in my life. I always say I have extraordinary stories because I lived an extraordinary life. And that extraordinary is because of being unlimited in a lot of ways, because of living in an altered world like that. I believe in possibilities like you would. I mean, it's just amazing. I just dwell in possibilities like, okay, yeah, this can happen because I know it can.
So there's nothing that surprises you.
Not really. Like, people will say, "You're not going to believe this." Give me a try.
Book number 6, the Kryon series, which started with Kryon, New Information for Personal Peace, in 1993 by Lee Carroll.
Yes. The thing that I pulled out of that book, and there's a lot of stuff, I found them reading that series. I always felt happy. I always was smiling. I found them to be very uplifting and gentle and loving. But the thing that I remember out of them were these badges of color that you get through certain spiritual attainment. It shows up in your soul, according to Kryon, and you're identified in the in-between lifetimes, or physical 3D lifetimes, in the whatever word you want to say, that afterlife, if you want to use that word, by these badges of color in your attainments. And I was seeing those types of things in soul retrieval, but the way I was seeing them was these colors were being muted or eclipsed some way. The spirits were then doing healings of not only bringing soul pieces back, but actually bringing back the vibrancy, whatever was shrouding these colors, they were removing it in extractions. When I read that book, then I was like, this is not necessarily metaphorical, because you never know when you're in a journey if it's metaphorical or literal, if you could say that word. But I realized, oh, this is validating of what I'm seeing here with this color. And I actually started bringing that into my dialogues, bringing your colors back. And so people will often equate that to your chakras, which is fine. That's one way of doing it. But just bringing these colors back into full vibrancy for yourself. Yeah. They're not the chakras. I mean, Lee Carroll was talking about something different, but if you don't have that terminology, the chakras work.
So, book number 7, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, published in 1997. And this one, no surprises, is in our top 10 of books that are recommended over and over and over again.
I look at his work all the time. I follow him on Facebook and read his memes. I mean, he's such an amazing being. What I pulled from this book was a quote: "Uncontrollable mind chatter is the cause of all your suffering." Now, there's not any, I'll use another term like that, spiritual teacher that will use the word all. All is all inclusive. I mean, there is no exceptions to all. And that's why that passage made such an impact on me. If I'm suffering, it's because of the way I'm thinking and I'm feeling about something. So if I want to stop suffering, I have to change myself. I have to change within, which again aligns with everything else that I teach. It aligns with my understandings of shamanism as well as manifestation, that if you want something to change, it's not them or it's you. And when you change, then everything else shifts to be in alignment with that change. That's the way that it works. And that word all is jumped out at me in what it meant. And there's no exception.
Yeah. Book number 8 of Water and the Spirit, Ritual, Magic and Initiation in the Life of an African Shaman by Malidoma Somé, published in 1994.
Mm-hmm. It's a fascinating story of a man that was kidnapped when he was 4 years old out of an African tribe and then taken to a Jesuit seminary and kind of beaten into submission. But when he escaped from there at about 20 and went back to his tribe, the elders were not going to let him back in because they said, "You can't see anymore." Meaning that they use a different part of their brain when they are throughout their life. They use the right part of their brain, which is where the spirits live and where everything is alive, animated, and interacting. So when they're looking out at trees or a landscape, they're not seeing anything stationary. They're seeing all this interaction, communication, dance, movement. All these different things are taking place that you and I, when we look at it, it's all stationary. So that's what they meant with you can't see anymore. And I've run into that concept over and over again. I was adopted into a Lakota family almost 30 years ago, 29 years ago. And I would sit and listen to the elders talk. And they don't talk in a linear fashion. They call it circular talking, that drives Westerners nuts because you can't follow a conversation. But it's because everything is interacting and they're talking about these relationships, but not in a concrete way. It's in a very interactive, independent way. And then I had an opportunity of going down to Peru and working with some shamans that brought in the archangels in a cave. And the archangels literally came into the cave. Like they came in and they were there and they touch you and they interact with you and they do healings with you. And it just blows your mind. One of the comments that one of the men made was, "My wife was so involved with this. And then she left Peru and she went to New York and she was at Wall Street for 6 years. And then she was called back because her mother was ill, but she can't see anymore," is what he said. And she can't hear anymore. So those comments, I think, is what makes me strive to stay in that altered reality of the journey, because that's where you can see and hear and participate in this interaction of aliveness, of nature and of the spirits and of all things being interconnected. I love that world. And again,
You
these
know,
stories help me understand that that's what I'm seeking.
yeah, it's so interesting because as you're saying this, it's making me think that so many of us can't see or hear anymore. I mean,
Not if you're
you know,
westernized.
social media is driving our brains in a whole other direction. You know, everything's becoming polarized and people are becoming brainwashed. And, you know, with a thought, ideology, whatever it may be, that stops them from seeing anything else or hearing anything else. Mm.
Yeah, it's hard to even describe or put words to it because that world is not verbal. It's energetic.
Yeah.
And when you have these experiences, and people will have spiritual experiences, and then they try to explain them, and it comes out like, blah, 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 blah. Nothing can compare verbally to what this experience was because it's a different part. These people, everyone is born right-brained. Everyone, children. Like my grandson was such a good example of this. When he was born and he'd look at me, instead of looking at me, he'd look like this. And I know he was just seeing all of the activity going on around me, but he had no verbal ability to explain it, but I was watching him experience it. So we're all born with this ability, but because of our societies, our education, what we value, mathematics, language, we lose the ability to see with that side of the brain. So
We're going to take a short break now.
okay.
You're listening to an OBS Spiritual Book Club interview, and sharing her 10 best list of most inspirational books today is Shamanic Practitioner, licensed professional counselor, chemical dependency specialist, hypnotherapist, Reiki master, and founder of the Light Song School of First Century Shamanism and Energy Medicine, Jan Engels-Smith. We'll be back with more from Jan after the break. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Om Times TV.
Maya Angelou once said that there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and when I'm not hosting Om Times Media's flagship radio show What Is Going On and the No BS Spiritual Book Club, I help people share their untold stories. Books are my life, my joy and my passion, and there is no greater reward than helping aspiring writers get their books out of their heads and into the hands of those who are waiting to read them. If you feel that you have a book in you but don't know where to begin, visit sedgbeer.com, click on the Work With Me tab and find out how my experience helping others tell their stories might be just what you've been looking for. That's sedgbeer.com, sedgbeer.com.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Everything that we do, we can do in a contemplative manner. Through the art of contemplation, you can use the gene keys in a really powerful way. Gene keys is basically the code book of life. In the gene keys, the book is made up of these three levels: shadows, gifts, and siddhis. And the journey is through those three levels, kind of unpicking of the shadow states, the releasing of the gifts, and then the embodying of this higher consciousness called the siddhi And the cities are very exalted words. And it's not like we kind of suddenly are all these exalted Christ-like beings, but we have flashes and illuminations along the journey. And the more we get stuck into the journey, the more illumination comes to us, because the more we're releasing the light from in these codes inside our DNA. So all those revelations are inside us. So the contemplative way is the inner way.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Jen Engels-Smith, we're now on your 9th book, My Stroke of Insight, A Brain Scientist's Personal Journey by Jill Bolt Taylor, published in 2006. My goodness, what a book.
Yes. Fabulous.
Mm.
Jill did it for me. She validated so much of what the spirits had been saying to me. They had literally used the term left brain, right brain, even though that isn't a scientific term. But I was trying to find a way to explain to people that you're not woo-woo. This is not out of touch with reality. It's just using a different part of your brain that has been handicapped through our culture, actually covered up, and it's gone atrophy, in a lot of cases. They use the terminology left brain, right brain to help me explain to people that they're not woo-woo. They're just using their whole brain.
Yeah.
So then when Jill came out with this experience of having this aneurysm, I think it was, in her left side of her brain, and only being able to go into the right, she made this description just technicolor for me. One of the things that I was struggling with was in how to explain was the idea of oneness. People will give a lot of lip service to being one with each other, but there's still this sort of competitive edge or taking the high road. It's still a hierarchical type of description of being one with each other. But when she talks about oneness, of really what the right brain is all about, you can't tell yourself different from the telephone or from the sofa. You are one. And that gave a whole different perception of what Indigenous people are understanding, that when they're one with something, they don't see a difference between themselves. There's no separation. And she described it so beautifully because, she had this stroke on the left side. She was trying to get help and communicate, only having the right brain functioning, and she couldn't figure out how to use a telephone without merging into it. I mean, it was fascinating. It was just fascinating, but it helped me really understand that concept of what we're talking about when we're saying one. Because again, I've been westernized. Everything that I do is an effort to break out of those paradigms and try to get a glimpse of understanding of what that actually means. When you're in the right brain, that's all that it is. That there is no need to define it because it's an isness.
Yeah. I love it when people with her kind of credentials have experiences and then write about them, because that is just what we need. So many people who just don't believe in anything sit up and take notice when someone's got a lot of letters behind their name.
Well, she's a neuroscientist. She's a brain scientist, and she would have argued that.
Yep.
Happened.
Yeah. No such thing as accidents.
No, there isn't.
So book number 10, The Hidden Messages in Water by Masaru Emoto, published in 2001.
What an amazing man. I had the opportunity to meet him, and he's a scientist. He is not a shaman by any means. He's a scientist, but loved prayer, just loved to pray. And he would pray over contaminated water, like polluted water, and see changes in it. So then he started doing these studies where he would take vials of water and tape high vibrational words on the vials: gratitude, thankfulness, these different things, and low vibrational words, and see what happened to the water. And the way that he tested it was he would bring it down to freezing point and then photograph it and look at the crystals that had formed in the water, influenced by the word that was taped to it. Well, this was just music for me, thinking, okay, we are 70% water, 75% water, and everything is vibrational. So if I'm thinking or feeling certain words, that is affecting the water inside of me. That is affecting my cells. Every cell has water in it. And I can have different responses vibrationally inside of me, just like those little crystals, by what I'm thinking and feeling. So again, it all interconnects. It all weaves this beautiful tapestry of my life of shamanism and manifesting and all these different things and how it works. Prompted a whole line of products through Lightsong of high vibrational words on what are you wearing on your body? What are you wearing on your t-shirts? That has a direct influence because words are energy. They're a frequency of energy. And it's so profound to see these actual, in his case, studies coming out showing how this works. They're picture books, but I leave them when I'm in class, or when we used to be in class in person. I always had them on the altar so that people could go up and look at them, because you can, just being in the room, calling in the spirits, changes your vibration automatically, because they're high vibrational beings. And that change is part of water. In shamanism, we don't believe that pollution is an environmental thing. We say that the water on the earth is responding to the negative thoughts of people. And that's what causes pollution. If you want to clear pollution, you clean up your thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's that interconnection that I was talking about.
A lot more than water.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
It applies to a lot more than water.
Yes. But water, when I was working with the elements, and I did a journey one time, and I asked the water, I said, tell me something about yourself that I don't know. And it said, we're completely programmable. Now, in shamanism, crystals were used to program things. Crystals are used in healing because you can program them. And as you know, like crystals, quartz crystals are used in watches because you can put electrodes through them and with second intervals, and it will pulse. It's a programmable thing. It's going to do a broadcast of that for eternity, once it takes on that program. Well, I didn't know that water was programmable like that. But you can program water, let's say, like with Emoto's work, tape a word on your water bottle, program the water, and then drink it. You're now getting that high frequency. It's completely programmable. And that's why it shows pollution, because again, it's being programmed by our thoughts and our words. Anyway, I just found it fascinating.
Well, that's your 10 best list. I want to talk about you now.
Okay.
So you're an avid snowboarder.
Yeah.
Do you get much opportunity to snowboard?
I've been twice already this last week. So yeah,
Wow.
I try to go once or twice a week all winter.
Well, you're in the Pacific Northwest, aren't you?
I live
Yeah.
about 45 minutes from the mountain. And then we usually do a couple trips. We go various places snowboarding in Canada or the United States, not in
Yeah.
Europe. Mhm.
What is the feeling that you get when you are snowboarding?
Oh boy, that's an interesting question.
It must be a high frequency feeling.
It can be. And I learned early on that instead of going, oh no, to go, woohoo. And that woohoo changes immediately your experience.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. Instead of like looking at something, and go, oh no, I'm going, woohoo, here it comes. And so,
Yeah.
because I started snowboarding later on in my life. I started when I was 55, so I wasn't starting as a kid. So it was quite an adventure for me to switch over.
Do you get people saying, really? Aren't you afraid of breaking something?
No. I mean, I have gotten hurt once, but I love it.
I
It's
can
a
understand that, you know. I got hooked on rollerblading when I was living in America. And then when I came back to England, I stopped about 3 months ago. I thought, no, that's something I love. And I bought myself some rollerblades.
good on you. I'm going to come over there and we're going to go rollerblading together because I love to rollerblade too.
So another thing about you is that you want I Love Rock and Roll played at your memorial. I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett.
Yeah, I am a rock and roll fan. Not heavy metal by any means, but a rock and roll. And I will turn it on as soon as this interview is finished, and it plays in my house all day. And I dance around.
Another high frequency
Yes,
activity.
yes, it
Yes.
is most definitely.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, yeah, that sums it all up. Dead and gone. Who is she? She loves rock and roll.
Yeah, I do too. I like the soft rock, rather than the heavy metal. But yeah, I do. I still, I'm showing my age, but I think some of the modern music is great, but a lot of it just doesn't compare.
Well, Emoto did music in those books too, and he put heavy metal in there. And it was a chaotic mess of broken crystals. It is not good for you to listen to, according to
Yeah.
the damage that it did to water. And then he put different musics. I think he had in folk songs and polkas and things like that. And you can see, like even in the polkas, the water crystals were in like little four squares. It's just fascinating how it mimics the energy of that
I
vibration.
know. I'm fascinated by cymatics and the patterns and the mandalas that you can get,
Mhm.
Incredible. So let's talk about your books. You've written 2 books, Through the Rabbit Hole, Exploring Energy and the Shamanic Journey, and Becoming Yourself,
Mhm.
Journey from Head to Heart, which is, as they say, the shortest journey, but actually the longest
Good
for
luck.
most people. Yeah. So what inspired those books?
The spirits inspired the first one. I was told by them to write Becoming Yourself. And I didn't want to do it. Literature was not my game. I was coming from the world of science, really, at that time. And I never considered myself a writer. I said, I can't spell. And they said, you don't have to. You have spell check. I was just giving up all these reasons. But they said, you sound like a broken record, because I was saying the concepts in my sessions with people. They'd come in and I would start talking about how energy works and all of these different things that are in the book. And they said, you need to write it down. People need this information. So I literally created a circle altar around my computer with stones, big rocks, brought them in, made an altar, embellished the altar, and I would sit in the middle of it, call in the spiritual light, move into an altered place, and then start typing. I did not feel the confidence of writing it just out of my left brain or out of my normal self. They wanted the book. Okay, you write the book. And was my process with it.
Do you have any more coming?
I don't know. In my inner Akasha and readings that I have, they always say you're 3 books. Writing a book is it takes years to write a book. At least it does for me. I've always wanted to publish a lot of my documented stories in the Soul Retrieval and let people know some of these experiences. And I may or may not do it. I'm not sure, but
That's a good idea. People love to read about experiences. We've only got a few moments left. I want to talk about your manifesting miracles. You have these gatherings and they're completely free, which is very nice. And what happens during these gatherings?
sure. The intention that I had for these gatherings, which is part of what happens in them, is that I have been a student in an understanding of manifestation since I was in my early 20s. And I have found so much about how things work through my shamanic work is enmeshed with manifesting the type of life that you actually want. We have all kinds of different cosmologies of healing, and we can go through ritual and ceremony and all kinds of unique sort of difficult ways of manifesting, or you can work on your own internal light and love and goodness and be taking care of that. And when you take care of that and really own that and embody that, then that's also a major healing. In fact, when I was doing soul retrievals for people, before we started the soul retrieval, I would take them through a guided meditation that would bring up this light. And when I brought them up and I'd have them in this really expanded state, then I'd do the soul retrieval. And I was so successful with soul retrievals. I mean, off the charts successful with them. And I never knew why. Like, why? What I'm doing is, why? And I realized after a while, it's because I brought them to the match of calling their pieces in. Their divine light was so high, it just automatically matched frequency with their pieces that were lost, and they just came back in without, it was like effortless. And so with manifesting, I've learned all these things. So in the course, or it's not a course, it's a gathering, I just give tips in how to bring up this light. And each time we do a different tip, we practice it. And then I ask for people, what questions do you have? Where it's holding you back? Where are you not being successful? Then we talk about those questions. Their questions, it answers so many people's questions. One person's question answers 100 people's. Yes. And so we just talk about those things. And the group, I told them, I don't want to teach. I just want to be a resource to you. So pick my brain. And so it's really their needs that generate where we go. And then I, of course, have to throw in some PowerPoints and stuff to, try to give visualizations of how things work. But it's all energy medicine. It's all quantum, all these things. It's shamanism. Shamanism is quantum concept. It's just a science way of explaining this relationship to vibration, which is what shamanism is.
How often do you do these gatherings?
Every other week. They're on Sundays at 10 o'clock in Pacific time. So I think that's around late afternoon for you in England.
Early evening, 6 p.m., yeah.
And
a good time.
Yeah, I picked 10 o'clock because universally, most people can get it. I do have some people that are there in their pajamas. It's like 2 a.m. Okay, I'm glad you came. But yeah, I've had a nice turnout with it. There's no obligation. I'm just there as a resource. It's just giving back. I mean, it's not even giving back. I've been giving back, but it's just doing it.
And sharing. It's a lovely thing to share.
Well, it's helpful.
Okay. Last question.
Okay.
If your life were a book, if you were a book, you, books often have, little words on them like thrilling or sensational or illuminating or whatever. What one word do you think would be on your book to
One word.
describe you?
Loving.
Loving.
Yeah. I did a journey one time. I was in a class and they said, what gift did you come in with that you maybe don't realize or you've lost or you're not really identifying with? And what the Spirit says, you came in with the capacity to love deeply.
And that's a beautiful thing too. Jan Engels-Smith, thank you so much for adding your 10 best list of spiritual books to the No BS Spiritual Book Club library. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been so much fun to several friends and what the process has been able to share it. And it's kind of been incentivizing for them too to take a look at what's influenced their lives.
Yeah, it is. We should all do it. So if you want to know more about Jan's books, if you would like to join the Manifesting Miracles gatherings, visit her website, lightsong.net, where you'll find all kinds of goodies. And you can also learn about the shamanic training there. That's it for this week. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer. I'll be back at the same time next week with another 10 best interview for the No BS Spiritual Book Club. Till then, goodbye from me, and thank you again to Jan Engels-Smith.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.